Amigos, amigas, this is JD Cantu from Hispanic News Online. We're continuing our 30 for 30 podcast series with movers and shakers and new leaders from the Latino and Hispanic community. And this is the very last week we're doing this, and October 15th is coming up pretty quickly. But we're leaving some of the best for last, and I'm glad you guys are following me because you guys are going to be really excited about somebody that I have on today. Um, you guys, I think, have heard a little bit about it, so this is about the right time that we got her on for this because she's going to tell you a little bit about her project or what she's doing. And it's always so good to find someone who's passionate about what they're doing. And Denise is one of those people that's just really passionate. So I want to introduce my new best friend, Denise Solar,
Soler.
Soler Cox.
Mhm.
There you go. There goes the gringo in me talking Spanish. And she is working on this wonderful project called Enye. I know that some of you have heard about it, but I want Denise to give you the whole scoop about this. Denise, good morning, and come and join us. Tell us about your story. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Will do. First, before I get started, I just wanted to say thank you so much, JD, for inviting me on the show to share about what I'm doing here in Denver with my team with Project Enye, and also for including me as part of the kind of ending of the 30 for 30. And I just hope that I can provide value for people on this call, as much value as my other counterparts and peers. So thank you for that. A little bit about Project Enye. We actually pretty much got started about 3.5 years ago with a pitch. I approached my partner, my now partner, Henry Ansbacher, who was a veteran filmmaker, with an idea to share the story of 16 million. So 16 million of the 56 million of us Latinos living in the United States are what you call Enyes. And so just like X and Y, Enya means that you are American born and you have at least one parent from a Spanish speaking country. And for me, I thought, sort of growing up in the suburbs of Manhattan, that I had my own kind of personal story and that I felt like I was on the outside looking in. I grew up in an area that was very non-Latino, and but so outside of my house, it was very Americano, suburban life, right? And actually very Americana. And then we went to church in Spanish Harlem, where my parents met every Sunday. And so I was sort of brought into this completely different world every single week. And where my mom's first name, Dolores, became Loling, which is what her nickname was and is, and where everyone spoke Spanish and we ate Puerto Rican food. And it just felt like I literally toggled between two different worlds and kind of benefited from that, absolutely, but also struggled a little bit because of it. And like I said, I felt like it was really my own personal narrative. And then spent some time in Miami in my 20s and had one kind of fated evening where I hung out with a bunch of other friends who I know now were Enyes, and we were talking about our lives and we were making jokes and we were laughing, we were crying, and and that night, I realized that my story, a story that I thought was just my own, where I struggled in my life and feeling kind of isolated, was actually the story of all of my friends at the table. And then I had this like aha moment that if it was the story of all my friends at the table, then it must be the story of every single person, every single American that was born in this country that had at least one parent from a Spanish speaking country. And I just felt so incredibly connected to those people in that moment because I realized, I think when you hear, whenever I've heard someone else's story and I realize, wow, I'm not alone. I thought that was just me. All of a sudden, there's incredible connection with that person or thing. And that's what happened to me that night. And I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops because I wanted people to know that they belonged to a group, this in between group, and that it was a thing and a particular experience that was ours and ours alone. Because when I was in Puerto Rico, I wasn't Puerto Rican enough for my Puerto Rican family. And growing up in the suburbs of Manhattan, I wasn't American enough for my American friends. And so, this middle place called Enye was something that I could call myself and call other people. And so I vowed that night that I would make a movie about it. So a ton of people could know in kind of one fell swoop about this thing and feel healed and feel included. And, um, and then I promptly waited 17 years, sort of avoiding the idea of it and really trying to rationalize it and push it away. But it remained on my list of commitments, every or resolutions. Every January 1st, I would sit and write everything I wanted to accomplish that year because I'm very type A, and it would always make the list. And then finally, the 17th time I wrote it, I just thought, you know what? I'm going to write it. If I'm going to write it, I'm going to write it one last time. And if I don't do it this year, then I won't write it next year. And to me, JD, that was like I would be committing the greatest sin if I wrote it one more time and I didn't do it. And that would be my punishment. And so it was that year that I actually pitched it to my partner, actually, just a few weeks later. He loved the idea and we began to develop it. Now, that was about 3.5 years ago, like I said, and it's kind of changed and morphed since then. But that's kind of like the origin story for the whole project.
That's such a great story because, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm thinking that is such a similar story that we have as border babies.
No way.
Like we have in Texas, because I'm here in Texas, and
Right.
I just finished interviewing somebody who Denise, and we were talking about being border babies, and
Mm.
being able to talk to someone about going and get the mandado, which is
Uh-huh.
running across the border and go getting limes or food or whatever it is because it was cheaper to do that. It was such a common story between people who are in the border areas who know that either have family still in Mexico and stuff. So that's really interesting to hear about you and the Enya group because we kind of have the sort of same thing that you do, which is kind of interesting. Let me ask you this: why a film? Why not just interview people, do a podcast, do a magazine? Why a film?
You know what? That's a great question, and for I don't know why. All I knew is when I had that aha, I just thought if I could make a documentary about this, that would, at the time, in my 26-year-old brain, that would have the greatest impact. And so, fast forward, we actually have decided we actually get the message out on a few different platforms. So not only are we in post production on the actual film, but we also do a podcast, a companion podcast to our microdoc series. And so not only are we working on a film, but we have a podcast as well as a web series where we feature Enyes every single week. And we've got a season of about 16 of them on our website right now. So in the modern world, like when I was 26, the internet had just started just a few years before I had the idea. And podcasts, although they were out there, it just wasn't like something that was as out there as they are now and as common as they are now. And but in the kind of the modern world where this idea exists, you kind of spreading the concept out on as many platforms as we can became the thing that we felt like we had to do. So we're really getting the message of Enya out three different ways.
And and they're both all powerful because in order to do the research about you, I went to your short series and I
Mhm.
immediately started looking at them, and it was so amazing that I could just see them on my phone, and they were so conveniently, accessible. I do you, Can you tell people where they can find this real quick so that before we
Sure. Absolutely. So our website is projectenya.com. And so Enya is the extra letter in the Spanish alphabet, the N with a tilde. But unfortunately, when I purchased the URL, you can't buy Enyas. Enyas can't exist on URLs. And so we had to spell it out phonetically. So it's the word project and then enye.com.
guys, you need to go see some of these interviews. Matter of fact, I was just joking with her earlier about one of the interviews she had, and but you guys got to check it out. Okay, let me ask you this. So your mom and dad,
Hmm.
totally from Puerto Rico, right?
Well, my dad's parents are Cuban and Puerto Rican. My mom is from Puerto Rico, born in Puerto Rico.
What did they think about this project?
Oh, what a great question. Do you know that you're out of all the interviews I've done, um, I think you might be the first person to ask me that. Um, so I will be honest and tell you that my father passed away when I was young, but my mom had a problem with this, and she didn't understand it. And um, I think, although Puerto Ricans, we don't fall under the category of immigrant. I'm going to just use that term because most Latinos, most Enye's parents are immigrants, technically. So I think the narrative of the immigrant is a lot having to do with sacrifice. And, for either unborn children or children that they bring over or children that they have when they get here. And there's a lot of guilt that that one feels, that Enya children feel. I certainly felt that way. So when I was struggling, um, growing up, being bullied in high school, and being called a word that I probably can't use on your podcast, I felt like I couldn't share that with my mom because if I sort of made up with a teenage mind that if I shared that, that somehow her sacrifice in moving here um, would not have been worth it, or it would have been interpreted differently. Does that make
No,
sense?
he does. Absolutely, yes.
So, so so part of the reason why I held on to this idea and I didn't do anything about it is because I definitely felt like I didn't want it to be misinterpreted by my mom or by my family. And so when I say that I wasn't Puerto Rican enough for my family, I would hate for them to feel hurt by that, right?
Right.
But that is how I felt. And part of the reason why I avoided doing this project and this film was because I was concerned that my mom might take it the wrong way, and that's actually exactly what happened. But and we're kind of on the other side of it now, and she really understands that it actually wasn't a personal thing. It's actually systemic. It's most Enyes feel on some level that they can identify with the stories we're telling. And so they're universal. It's actually a universal experience for a child of any immigrant, actually, to feel like they're living in two different worlds and kind of navigating two different cultures and having to abide by two different sets of rules, if you will. So it's great that I can answer this question now that we've actually had some resolution. And so my mom and I, we worked on this. We talked about it this June, and we did a really big production trip in New York in June, New York City. And I'm really happy to say that she was able to walk me around the old neighborhood that we used to live in the Bronx, and got a chance to spend time in her home. And all of that is actually in the film. But it was a very rocky year, the year prior, because of a lack of understanding of really what it was that I was doing. But now she understands and she gets it. And not only does she get it, but she's introducing me to her friends, people that can help, and really, really supporting the project.
That's so awesome. Once again, parallels here. We have the same thing with the border babies because,
Really?
yeah, because you're not a Mexican anymore and
Mm-hmm.
you're just gotten into the American. And if you're like me, which was one of the younger ones, all my other brothers had gone through the whole transition. So now I was totally American.
Uh-huh.
So you get the
Yep.
same feeling. You don't really belong in one area, but you don't belong totally in the other, and
Right.
it's interesting. I'm so glad you're doing this, and I'm glad your mom's okay with it because it's going to affect not only the Anyas, but I think a lot of us too. The other factors that are in the immigration population.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's really good that you're opening up and having people. And I looked at a couple of your stories, and people cry. You
Yes.
make people cry. I can't believe they let you make them cry, but they do because they're so emotional about their experience. And that's one of the beautiful things about what you're doing is that you're letting them have a little catharsis. They're releasing what they've been feeling for so long, and you're sharing their story with people. I'm gonna bring up my favorite one, which is when uh, Lupe is
Uh-huh.
talking about helping. And I know everybody out there has gone through this, where either
Yep.
your mother, your grandmother, or somebody that you see that's a first immigrant, and they're struggling to get something asked or done, and the establishment doesn't understand them, and they're looking at them like, oh my God, really? When are they going to learn how to speak English? And you
Right.
just feel like, like I'm the person that jumps up and say, let me help you with that, because
Hmm.
I feel like we need to protect them. I feel such a empowerment to just step up for them.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're doing is a project that's definitely needed, because we're getting to the point where we have people like yourself who are in power and can actually get this message out. And so this is a really, really good project. So you were saying that you have podcasts, you have the mini series, you have the movie coming out, and but you're also involved in the community, aren't you? You do stuff in the community.
Yes, we do. Right. So we're actually doing, we try to do as much community work as possible. So I do a lot of speaking engagements. I love speaking in high schools. For some people, that would terrify them. And for me, it's a very healing thing. And so not only do people cry when I'm interviewing them, but when I'm talking to them, like if you can believe this, in a high school, not usually right when I walk in the door, but by the time I've left, there are kids that are really moved, and they come up to me and they talk to their school counselors afterwards, and they open up and talk to their parents afterwards, and they feel an opening. And that's, I think, what this project offers. Is it where people, let's say, it's not like they're shut down. It's just no one has ever asked them how they feel about this. And so my most popular piece of commentary that I get when I interview people, and so far I've interviewed 64 people for the film and our web series, and the most popular comment is, no one has ever asked me this before. And oftentimes I hear stories that people have never shared before, and stories like, I remember the day that I told my father I was going to stop calling him papi. And if you're Latino,
Mm-hmm.
you know that probably just sent chills down your whole body, you know? And for me, I remember the day when I told my mom, please stop putting tostones, deep fried plátanos, right,
Mm-hmm.
in my lunch. And I would prefer a bologna sandwich on Wonder Bread with mustard.
Right.
See, like
Right.
my mother held her heart like it was the biggest offense. And then I remember talking to Lupe about that, and she remembered telling her mother when she asked her mother to make her a PB&J instead of burritos. And so Enyas have these stories. We just don't share them because no one has asked about them or kind of created a forum where it's okay to talk about it. And a lot of times people oftentimes just want to talk, and they say, well, isn't it great to be bicultural? Isn't it great to have these two influences? And yes, it totally is. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I love that I can fit in to two totally different worlds. But the point of Enya is to talk about things that we don't normally share, to uncover sometimes painful things, sometimes funny things, but things that connect us, Mexicanos, Puerto Ricanos, people from every single country, and where there's no barriers on country, and it's really all that we have in common because we're the children of those immigrants. And really, that's the work I'm interested in doing, is connecting by creating a safe environment for people to share from their hearts. And so a lot of times that means that I'm crying, they're crying, but there's a lot of hugging, there's a lot of love, and more than anything, there's a huge opening that happens and a huge clearing that happens. And it's like, okay, wow, okay, now what? And a lot of times people tell me, I'm going to go home and I'm going to have a conversation with my husband, or I want to call my parents, I want to talk to my children. And I'm interested in that type of healing. I'm interested in what happens in those conversations, what are people getting past? And then what are their lives going to look like now because they had these conversations, you know? Um, So this is the work I do, and I'm incredibly proud of it.
Let me ask you this. So, with the amount of technology that we have nowadays out here, you
Hmm.
know, I'm always encouraging kids to open up their computer,
Right.
do a podcast, do something, because their story is a story from a viewpoint that no one else has except their own. How would you tell people? Well, let me back up here. How did you get started? Did you had a film crew? Did you how did this whole project? I mean, because what you're doing is pretty high end and it's beautiful work. So, did you have a camera cinema background? How did it happen with you?
Right. So I don't have any kind of the only background that I have is I inherited that. I think children of Enyes are kind of born and bred to be leaders because we know that the sacrifices that our parents made, and we've worked really, really hard. So I have a very strong, and also my parents instilled a very strong belief in self to me. So although I didn't have the background, I was very clear that if I set my mind to something, that I could get it and do it, right? So when I was ready to make the commitment to make this film, I pooled my resources, which yielded one name. So I had one friend that had a next door neighbor that made movies, and that was the only play that I had. So I'm like, okay, well that's this list. Well, I guess I better call him. And I remember calling him and sharing the movie. And to be honest, what I thought he would do is direct me to somebody else. I thought he would say, "Oh, you should call this person and that person," and I was ready to go on a journey. I did not think that the journey would be with him, but that actually is what happened. And I'm very fortunate. My partner is an Oscar nominee. He's made 15 films. He's had films on HBO, on PBS, and very experienced person. So I think the how, I was willing to do whatever it took. So it was very attitudinal.
Gotcha.
And then I looked at the resources that I had, which was one person, and I just started. And you'd be really surprised all of the amazing people that have come to this project and contributed to this project. I never ever could have predicted or imagined, but we just got started. So without a film background, I attracted a filmmaker, and then from there we attracted some people that were willing to invest in the project and give us some grants, and then we were off to the races.
So there you go, folks. You see, it, I'm keep telling our community here that their stories, their diversity, is something that's wanted out there and needed.
Hmm.
And I'm so glad there's people like you, Denise, who's breaking those barriers and
Thank you.
going out there. I mean, if you hear her story, she had no idea how she was going to do this, but she had a plan. I mean, she was just not going to say no and take no for an answer, and she did it. So I hope that some of you out there take it to heart and understand that just because you just don't have the skills or whatever, you can't get somebody to help you do this stuff. So, you know, I usually ask everybody that I talk to about because in doing what we do, we end up touching people all the time in one way or another. Do you happen to have a story that you want to share with us with one of those people that you just interviewed and you just can't get them out of your head because what they said to you was just so strong, you just kind of go, "Wow, that's powerful." Could
Hmm.
could you share one with us if you don't mind?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to think of one right now, and I feel like after we hang up, I'll probably think of that one. But I have to say, like, I've been really fortunate to interview 64 people, and throughout the entire course of having done that, which took about 18 months, um, I feel the most added to. Oftentimes, I'll take notes in my interviews with them because of the way that I'll love the way that they articulate a particular feeling or. Yeah, just so no one specifically comes to mind, but I guess the collective voice of the people that I've interviewed has made the most extraordinary impact on me personally. Like when people talk about who this project is for, I feel like the biggest beneficiary, because I feel like through their words and them sharing their stories, I've had the chance to grow and learn about myself in ways I'd never imagined. And so I guess I'll just answer that really with the collective voice of all of these stories that I'm super excited to introduce people to, introduce your listeners to on our website at projectenye.com, and then soon to introduce in our film as well as in season 2 of our microdoc series that will be released this winter. So that's how we'll share those stories with you then.
Well, at this moment, since you've given them all the information of where they can find you, can you give them, like, once again, so that I make sure that they get a hold of you, an email or something that if they're interested in working, or asking you questions about your project or sharing their experience with you, that they could possibly reach you? Can you give me
Yeah.
some good contact information?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go ahead and email me at Denise at projectenye.com. That's my personal email. And I'd be happy to hear. I love reading everyone's emails. I do have to say, sometimes it takes me a long time to get back to everybody, but I do get back to every single person. And I'm a little bit behind on that right now. But I would love to hear from as many people as want to get in touch with me to ask questions or share their stories or just plain old want to say hello.
So you hear that, everybody? Primos, primas, don't be shy. Please, if you don't ask, if you don't reach out, there's just no way of people knowing your story or getting to help you or, being a mentor or whatever you need in your life. If you don't ask, you just won't get it. But
Hmm.
if you do, you'd be surprised how many doors have opened. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to be straightforward with everybody. I had heard about the Enye project, but I hadn't even reached out to her. Somebody else got us connected, and I am so excited that we're working on this project together, on this podcast series, because I can see the parallels of what we're doing, Denise, and I hope that we can help more people. And I think that working together, we will probably be able to help a lot more. So I look forward to having more conversations with you. The other question I tend to ask all my guests are, if you had a room full of young Latinos in front of you, give me some kind of a word of advice that you would give them, about life, about creativity, about themselves. Give me some kind of word of advice that we can leave everybody with.
Sure. So oftentimes when I speak to youth, I tell the story about, the origin story of Enya, and I'll share about how I didn't act on it for 17 years. And I really believe that everyone's got something like that. Everyone's got something that's on their heart right now that they know that if money weren't an object, that they would love to do. The type of job that they would just spring out of bed every morning and go do that if they could only do it. And so, my question is really to anyone who's got something like that identified already. Like for me, it was I want to make a movie about these people. Is what are you unwilling to do to get that? Because I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm willing to do anything, right? But what I find is the answer, really, the key can be found in why that outcome is not happening, is in kind of uncovering what are you unwilling to do. And so, in answering that question, one can find out exactly what's in the way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Wow, wow, guys, I 30 minutes flew by.
Yeah.
I've just spoken to her for 30 minutes, and we haven't even scraped the surface of what she's doing and the impact that what her film is going to have on our community. This is the moment that I just have to bow and say thank you, Denise, for coming on our show, uh, and for doing what you're doing. I think that your project is going to make a huge impact in our community and outside our community to introduce us to the general market. So my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
and for being so gracious and so forthright with me and talking to me because your project is big. And there's a lot of times when you just can't talk to people like yourself, and you just opened your door and said, let's talk. And so here we are. So, amigos, amigas, I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. Denise was just fabulous, and I promised her I wouldn't make her cry, and I didn't. But come back mañana to Hispanic News Online, and we're going to introduce another Latino or Latina for you. We're getting to the end, but by the time we're done, I'm going to give you three Latinos or Latinas that are leaders in our community. So when somebody says, "Who's a new a leader in the Hispanic community?" you can go back and find one here. And also, don't forget, please reach out to them. They're all begging you, asking you, telling you, reach out to them. They want to be mentors. They want to help you. They're willing to open their doors and give you some information or help you in any way you can. So no se hagan de boca chica. Come back mañana and let's listen to somebody else. Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, JD. It's been an honor. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.